noise or other disturbances that would be objectionable to reasonable persons or adjacent tracts. All businesses on the property are required to obtain and maintain all licenses and permits required by any government entity, let's see, state, local, or federal. Any use contrary to law, sexually oriented businesses, tattoo, body piercing shop, sales of drug paraphernalia are prohibited. The property may not be used for bars, nightclubs, restaurants, firearm or archery ranges, or outdoor warehousing. Products and merchandise may not be displayed outdoors. In 4.13 on parking, there shall be a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 8 parking spaces for customers. Ingress and egress shall be clearly designated.
Thank you, but I would still think that should be signed before we go to vote.
Clark?
Being an old real estate guy, deed restrictions, I don't have a microphone, so that's good. I apologize, but understand that this is being executed by the grantor. Correct. That will be the seller of the property. And it will be recorded with the deed.
I understand.
Okay, so that's what's known as a deed restriction. Okay, and that restricts that property for as long as it's stated.
And how can the POA assure that will happen between the grantor and the grantee? The only way that it can be assured is if they write that agreement with the POA. I totally understand deed restrictions,
Okay,
but they were supposed to be giving us assurances that before we showed this vote, so we could tell the community that it's going to be restricted.
Are you going to sign this deed restriction?
After the vote. I mean, if it
yeah,
doesn't,
if it doesn't pass.
if it doesn't pass, this is all for naught anyway. I mean, none of this, except the fact that it's still on Lake Iowa property proper and under the covenants and bylaws and rules and regulations, like any other residential.
Right. So,
This, all of this is only if it is to be rezoned commercial.
The deed restriction would be between her and the buyer. There's no, and any further buyers down the road, right? But that is no assurance that once we allow this vote, the vote takes place. There's no assurance other than her good faith word to say that will happen. We were suggesting an agreement between.
You're suggesting that she goes to the closing of the sale and not execute this document.
That could happen.
Leslie, and I know you've got a verbal okay from her attorney. Can we just do a 1-paragraph deal that says, we agree we will sign this document if the vote passes? Is that a reasonable request? Is it needed?
Yes, I'm sure we can do that. I'm just trying to think how we can enforce it. I think I can work something up for the satisfied of Jim and anybody who feels like he does. And let the manager or president know.
So
I
we
think
need,
it's just a cover agreement, right?
right, we just need that agreement signed, a legal document, perhaps they notarize, says they agree to sign this document if the vote passes.
Yeah, I'll try to work something that can be enforced.
So
Okay.
if they need to sign that before we agree to have a vote.
No, I think we can say, right.
We can't sign anything unless.
I propose then that we agree to this election, this special election, contingent upon delivery of that agreement that I've just discussed, signed by the landowner, and that they will sign the deed restrictions upon passing, if the election passes, if the vote passes. So contingent upon that, I propose that we go ahead and approve this special election. That satisfy you? Okay, so with that modification, do we have a second to that modification? Steve? Okay, Clark, is that a question or were you second? Okay, okay. Steve did. So any further discussion? All in favor of this motion, say aye. All opposed? Okay, Jim abstains. Okay, motion passes. Just that one little thing, and you'll be ready to go. All right, committee updates. Discuss and take possible action on member charter changes for all committees, formation of any new committees. So heard for Julian, they're still doing some juggling on the rules enforcement. So Corky had indicated he would step in temporarily through the end of the year. They've got Mike Brendel has agreed to serve as chair of that instead of Julian. Julian's still working with him on the transition. So, and then on the same committee, rules enforcement, Rich Gardner has resigned. So another committee that we need to rework is the election committee. Now that we have electronic voting and it's all working well, we don't need the traditional function they did of counting votes and things like that before. So primarily, we need to make sure the electronic system is all working and figure out how we get the votes from the auditor and announce them at our annual meeting. So I've asked Kathy if she would chair the rework committee. I'm going to ask Bill Turner, who I've been emailing on this, to serve on the committee. And then Scott Manning is an employee, is at an ex officio position. Our IT guy. So those are the three that I'm proposing to put on the committee now. And if Kathy needs additional support, she'll let us know in the future. So those are the two committees I know. Anybody else have any? Sam Sanders?
Yeah, from the Safety and Security Committee, Jack Beaver has moved to Kyle, and he's no longer on the committee.
Okay. Moved. Thank you. The others? Corky?
We'd like to add Jim Adams to the rules, or the bylaw committee.
Okay, bylaw, yeah. And others? Okay, do we have a motion to make these changes to these committees?
So moved.
Sam moves, we have second, so Jerry seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Okay, anybody opposed? All committee changes are approved. Bylaws Committee, Corky Cahoon, update on proposed bylaw changes.
Y'all have a little handout, thank you.
This is a handout that I did the first one.
Thank you. Let me just bring you up to date on just a refresher on what we have to do to change the bylaw. Right now, we have a notice in the September communique for members' input. So the committee acts on input from the board, from the members, and if they have any that they've generated upon their own. We've given the members till the end of October to give us input. We have gotten some input, we'll go over that in a minute. Our timeline to get it done by in time to go into the February election, we have to give the members at least a 15-day notice before y'all vote on any changes. So what we're going to talk about tonight and maybe next month, we're just talking about some recommendations. You won't be voting on them until November or December when an article is placed in a communique at least 15 days before we talk about And just a reminder, 20% of our members must vote, and 2/3 of those that do vote must approve a bylaw change. The board is allowed to approve some administrative changes, and they'll come up with a few word changes, clarification changes, but we don't have those for you right now. The board has given us a task of clarifying the restricted lake management reserve fund. That's been approved by a member vote, and make sure that that's well understood by our members, that would not have to go through a second vote if it exceeds $400,000. And I'll go over that recommendation with you in a minute. We also have some active reviews, the one you just mentioned with Kathy Gray, who's reviewing Article 6 concerning the electronic voting and that committee. And I discussed it with Kathy and would like to get the input at least by the end of October, if possible. Also, Jim Adams and Gerald Smith are working on some possible changes to Article 6. If you go to the second page, you see some red, hopefully you got it in color, some red. We have two options on the item that you gave the committee about clarifying the Lake Management Reserve Fund. The first one we talked a little about last month, where we put a generic statement in there that restricted funds approved by the membership are exempt from the 703Q, which says that we have to ask the members before we do a project over $400,000. Now, the group that put that paragraph together had already approved that the ARF, which is the other restricted fund, would be exempted. So if we put this generic statement in there, then if maybe next year, 2 years from now, if you have another restricted fund, say to build a health center or whatever you want to build, at this specific reserve fund, then it would come under that paragraph. And what we're trying to do is, if you'll read it, it explains that a member fund that's been approved by the members wouldn't have to be approved a second time by the members in order to spend that money. And then we went to paragraph or section 16, and we broke it. We broke out discretionary and restricted funds. See, that's on page 2 and 3. And the reason we've done that is the last 2 years, we've had a problem not only with the board understanding and creating additional reserve funds in violation of one of the paragraphs in our bylaws. And these funds get jumbled up, they're confusing. In fact, when I had my wife read this, I think about 10 minutes later, she was snoring. So this way is probably the proper way, but it may not be the best way. So we have proposed, if you go to page 4, we have a very simple solution, and that simply adds funds for the lake and the LMFRF to the exception paragraph and explains it, why we're doing that. So I've given you two options. Option one is good for a longer period of time. The other one isn't as confusing to our members. Since we're asking 2/3 of our members to vote to approve this, sometimes the simplicity of change is much easier than one that's longer. And I still think we could go into section 16 of the bylaws and break them down into 2 sections as an administrative change, since we're not changing any of what the funds say. We're just relabeling them so that they're more easily understood. And so whatever y'all decide, let me know, and we'll work in that direction. Any questions so far? Okay, we go to page 5, to just give you an idea of what we've gotten so far as input from the members. The first one's kind of interesting. It came from a member out here that wanted us to allow women to have their own
POA voice by allowing 2 votes per eligible household. And while that sounds like a very nice thing to do, once we got into it and started discussing it, we thought that it would be discriminatory to those properties owned by a single person or a corporation in the state, partnership, or other legal entity. So our position is that no change was recommended.
But the women can be the one voting member of a 2-person household, correct?
Well, it is at our house.
Mine too. Mine too.
The second one, you all can read that yourself. It's simply a prior board member who doesn't want to be identified at this point, saying that you have too many committees. The third one has nothing to do with the bylaws. It has everything to do with the covenants, and even though the bylaws and the covenants go hand in hand, that's not under our edict at this point. And that has everything, what it's dealing with is the authority to sell the golf course property. And then the fourth bullet down there is from the Lake Management Committee, and they're wondering if we could change the covenant to require seawalls made out of a certain structure. While we've addressed those, every one of these, we've gone back to the people that submitted them and told them either our opinion or that it wasn't going to be our, it wasn't in our bailiwick at this point. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what we have, sometimes what the folks are thinking. Is there anything you want to discuss in more detail?
Anybody?
If not, if you'll just let us know which direction y'all want us to go on that, the one that I've written in 2 options.
Okay, we do also want to look about bylaw changes. At our last board meeting during executive session, we discussed a better process for selling non-residential POA properties. That may be what Jim wants to amend on the minutes, I don't know, but have you and Jim been able to talk about that?
We've talked about it. I told him it wasn't in our, that is a covenant issue. It's not covered in our committee. We do have, obviously we do have an opinion, and we have someone willing to write the opinion. We can either present it to you or we can just give it to you.
So we can't specify a process for doing that? That was what the board voted on.
Okay, the process is a couple of things. You're not real comfortable talking about something that's not fully developed yet, but the process of selling that is explained in one part of the covenant, and it depends how you ask for a legal question. If you ask, can we do it? The answer might come back one way. If you ask for a legal review on the process, it may come back with a different answer. And we'll certainly address that and let you know the process. I don't think it's covered in the bylaw because it deals with the land. And I might also say that the board in 2017, the board recognized that they didn't have the authority to sell POA member-owned property, and we went out to the members for a vote, and they did not approve it. As a covenant change, Gerald Smith was the chair of that covenant committee.
Gerald was probably president of the board when we did.
He was president of the board and chairman of that committee.
After that. So that, something's not adding up there.
So certainly we'll put that together and Rick will send it to you, and you can let us know if you wish for us to address that in an open session, or we'll certainly give you our opinion.
Okay.
Can I say?
Yes.
my point on the minutes, or it was about that, but I think what Corky is, and maybe put words in your mouth, but he's saying is, he really doesn't have, he hasn't been given direction to work on that. And so, and he may be saying that it's really not just bylaws, or it's not bylaws, it's covenants. So, but I think you could, or we could hand over to the bylaws committee to outline process or procedures or anything, changes related to that or recommendations related to that. And I think he was just looking for, direction
Okay.
to follow, and I think that's what I was gonna try to point out later on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Corky?
Thanks.
Okay, Facilities Committee, Clark Enright, Pavilion update.
Yeah, hope everybody's enjoying the functions that we're having out there. We do have, about 4 items that we're continuing to work on. One of which was some of the floor issues, and we've come to a solution on some of that. You'll see some more work on that floor out there in the coming weeks.
I'm sorry. Also, the guttering, some of the water, as you know, that metal roof there is where the pitches come together to form the valley, and the rain falls there, that water is just flowing off of that thing. And what is happening, especially on the front of the pavilion, is the water's flowing and hitting the patio and then backing up into the building. What we're gonna do is, and we've got the gutter company coming, it's probably on your house, they just didn't put them in, those little blockers at the end of the valley, those little blockers when the water gets in and goes down into the gutter, those are gonna be put in, which will help alleviate a lot of that problem. The other issue is water pressure. We've got Charlie's working with Ronnie at the water department. There's a 3/4 inch line coming into that meter, and if we get some heavy usage in those restrooms, Randy and I went and tested that, and there probably needs to be an 1.5 inch or a 2 inch line coming into that meter. So we're working on that as well. What else?
Yeah.
I can't remember what the other thing
Fans.
is. Fans, oh yeah, the bass. The bass, something's wrong in the signal from the controller to the bass itself. A little signal on the wall, and we've got corporate bass coming out here to work on it. So that's another issue. Other than that, I've been looking at the cost of the budget. Randy says that, he's still working through that, a little bit, but it appears that we're gonna come in under budget, and we'll have that number for you as soon as we get to that point. But, early estimates are about 30 grand, something like that.
Very good. Any questions for Clark? Jim Fox has one.
Is there landscaping for the cabins?
They were not part of our budget. We're gonna talk about that a little bit and talk about doing something really minimal. You notice they left them blank. They're blanks. There's one on each side of the entrance and one around that curve on the front. But there's gonna be a discussion about that. And we'll see. Once we get to, I really wanna know what the numbers are. I want definitive numbers before we really work on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Clark? Okay, our next agenda item, Lodge and Tavern Committee, Pete Mason will be speaking on behalf of the committee. Item 1, discuss take possible action on lodge and pavilion usage policies. Pete?
Thank you, folks. Nice to be here. If you take a look, I'm assuming everybody got the documents. There's 3 main areas as far as reservations. For any of the facilities here, that'd be the assembly room, the pavilion, any one of the rooms, 19th over, if we put the dividers out here, so there's different rooms, smaller rooms. That's what would be included in this document. Excuse me. If you're looking at the first section here on member reservations, what we've put in here is, first of all, is a member may schedule up to 3 room reservations per calendar year. It was brought to our attention that an individual or several individuals could gather up and continuously book, say, the pavilion or the patio for a weekly basis, just continually book it where no one else had an opportunity to use it. So that's the first thing that we put in here, was we would limit that to 3 reservations per calendar year, per individual. Okay, there is no cost to Lake Iowa members to put a reservation in for any one of our facilities, and that would include the member themselves as well down to their children only, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, that type of, those types of individuals would not have a member status. Okay. Yes, sir.
No deposit on a member.
No deposit from a member, no cost, no charge.
Yeah, I see the inspection, but there's no deposit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a little bit more and I can work with it or something. That's it. Okay, individuals can reserve their space up to 1 year in advance. Yeah, Jim.
Can you use the mic? Mic.
You want to, let me go through this? That's what I would prefer to do, go through it and then pose your questions.
Let's do that.
And I think that would simplify the situation. Okay, so we're gonna, individuals can reserve their space up 1 year in advance. Reservations are made by contacting the lodge office manager. As we all know, that's Penny currently, but things may change 10 years down the road, so that's why it's worded that way. Members may not charge a fee to others attending the scheduled event other than to cover the cost of their event expenses. Members may not sublet a reservation. And this is covered primarily for use of the pavilion. There's already been a couple of situations of overlaps where a couple of different entities wanted to use the pavilion, and seeing as there's no way to separate the events, use of music, microphones, PA system, any things of that nature, that's why we decided that there would be no subletting and letting somebody else use at the same time. Okay. Let's see. And also that goes back to making up to 3 room reservations per calendar year. So you can't sublet it out that way either. Let's see. Members are responsible for any damages. That's why we've included an exhibit in here for a checklist. We know for certain, we've already found out that to replace a screen, one of the screens, if a child or somebody or something gets thrown through a screen and it needs to be replaced, that's a minimum cost of $1,100 to replace one of those screens. So the member would be responsible for that. Same as being here in the assembly room. If the assembly room, if there's damage done, the member will be responsible for reimbursement to the PLA. Okay. Okay, that's it on that section. Then you go to the member-sponsored nonprofit organizations. A nonprofit organization may charge a fee to fundraise or to cover event costs for their profit purposes. The reservation times can be reserved space up to 2 years in advance of the current date. And that allows for these nonprofit organizations such as the Kiwanis Club, MGA, WGA Anglers, all of them them that are listed there, gives them time to reserve the space before some outside entity would come in and use it and block out a date that they particularly like. Particularly anglers like to be in the fall, September timeframe. The Kiwanis Club is typically in April. You also have the NGA, WGA, with all of the different events that they sponsor, that would allow them first opportunity to utilize that space. Okay. If you notice down here, we've got recurring quarterly, monthly, and weekly events can be reserved up to 1 year in advance from the current date, and can be subject to cancellation by the lodge management due to a board meeting, committee meetings, community events such as holidays and celebrations. All of those things that are listed there would supersede an entity from using those assets. Okay. We go to the next page here, the pavilion, limited to one group reservation, no shared spaces. That goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, where there's no way to split up what's going on in the pavilion. And you might have 20 people having a birthday party and 100 people having some other type of event there, and it would be causing a lot of conflicts, as well as if there was damage, who is going to be responsible for that damage. If the pavilion is not used, the members may use the facility as is. And what we're pointing out there is furniture out on the patio, and there is some furniture that is being left there in the main part of the pavilion. So if you wanted to go out after a round of golf and your buddies want to go and sit under the pavilion, it's not in a reserved state, and go out there and bring in your cooler of beer and drink a couple beers with your buddies. And that would be fine as long as you don't remove the furniture from the pavilion perimeter, taking it out on the grass, taking it down to the beach. We don't want that to occur because it'll get lost and damaged. So if you do move things around, we're asking people to put it back where it belongs, where it came from. Like you would all do at your own home, right? So, also, you see here, there's a decorations policy. I believe that you all did receive that. I don't know if you got it in time, but that goes back to 2017 when that was created, and we've gone through and updated that in 2020. And basically, we're saying no nails in the walls, whether it's in the assembly room, pavilion, or any one of our assets. Nothing is nailed to a wall. If you are putting up streamers here in the assembly room like they've been known to do, and lights, there's special clips to be used on a drop-in ceiling like this. The ceilings in the pavilion are so high, no one is going to be able to hang anything from that anyway, unless they toss a rope up around a beam or something. So I don't think that would be a concern. Catering, there is an Exhibit A included in our policies here that allows individuals to have a catered event, and with all the charges that would be applied depending on if it's they want special napkins or tablecloths, or then depending upon the food and everything else, liquor, whatever, that's all included on this catering form. We've got an Exhibit B in here for the walkthrough inspection. We just feel that if you look at the security deposits down below in the table, you have those deposits available are there for you, and if you want to have an inspection done prior to somebody going in and using the facility, and certainly once they're done, to see if everything is still in good shape as when they received it and started using it. You will notice that the security deposit, we're suggesting that we go ahead and start collecting that deposit, running a credit card or a check through the system, and not not just going off of, oh yeah, we trust this individual and, it'll all clear out at the end. So there is that, and that hold and deposit is applied to the room fee as long as there's no damage or anything like that. Okay? And if you go to the next page, we talk about the refund policy, up to 60 days, and then it's broken down periodically throughout there, all the way down to 14 days cancellation of the event. Then liquor laws, as we all know, most of us know, you can't purchase alcohol in the 19th hole and carry it across the TADC line out there and take it out to the pavilion and consume it out there against the rules, and as well as they can't have alcohol in the pavilion and bring it back into the lodge. So they would have to adhere to that, and there would be language in the documents that we provide. So, and then you got all of the 3 exhibits here that I talked about throughout that presentation that are included in it, as well as the decorating policy. So Jim, I know that you have more than one question. What's that number?
On when you're in the members section, it talks about, you have so many times, or three times per year, and you have a year in advance. And I don't understand why a member has less rights than an organization on the number of times you can reserve something, or why there has to be a number of times for a member in a year and versus an organization. And why those different numbers? When members are all equal, or those are the people that run this place.
Well,
so I think we should make sure they have the equal rights to everything else.
That'll be up to the board. You guys make a decision. These were our suggestions to the board. The reason the 3 room reservations actually brought to our attention by you, when you said that you could reserve the pavilion 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and
That was for outside.
we took it to mean yourself or family members or whatever. That's what some of us heard, so that's why that was in there. The thing for the other members for 2 years, that's more for those organizations to give them time, especially the NGA, who's had in the past a difficult time getting their calendars prepared and making sure that they have secured the dates that they actually want. And that's why we were giving them up to 2 years in advance that they could book a facility for capers, for example, and several other major events that I know one year Kiwanis and some golfing event overlapped, and Kiwanis had the reservation in first, and it was first come, first served, and so the golf group had to move to a different location. So that's why we're trying to give them, those organizations, the option to take a little bit longer time to get their reservation.
Just from my standpoint, I think that's wise. I think it's very smart to get the organizations on there first and give them priority, because that is our big groups, and some of them are big fundraisers,
Right.
important to our community. So I'm for that. Does anybody else agree with Jim that members of organizations?
I'm not disagreeing totally there. I agree that we should have organizations, just maybe how it's worded. When you say nonprofit organizations, and that opens it up to a lot of things beyond officially sanctioned Lake Powell.
Or these are member-sponsored nonprofits, so versus a nonprofit entity coming from the outside that wants to use the pavilion.
Or I could bring in the Heart Association. I'm a member, I could bring in the Heart Association and reserve it 2 years in advance, but I can't do that for a wedding or something. So that's what you're saying. So I understand we should define what an officially sanctioned Lake Powell organization is, and I would be perfectly fine with it, but I just think this is kind of open-ended, and even some of the organizations listed here, again, I've been asking that question, what makes you an official organization around here? And nobody can define those. And so if I just create a club, am I an official organization? I think we should have some definition around that.
Not all of them, nonprofit, that are in non-state groups.
Well, it does talk to the Lake Kyle organization too. I'm just trying to say, what makes you a Lake Kyle organization?
For this document and for the Lodge and Tavern Committee, this is our first go at it. You provided a lot of input, some of the material that you gave to us, some's incorporated, some is not. This was our first go at it. It's certainly not written in stone. This is what we just suggested on our first go. We attempted not to have a 14-page document. And if we start listing every opportunity, every group, everything that you could possibly do, it would make this considerably longer. Now, if you want to go there, give us some direction, we can go back and make adjustments. Okay? I'm sure Steve, as far as I'm concerned, and we open to going back and making additions to this at the recommendation of the board. Okay, what other questions?
Well, then you got, under the member, this is more administrative than this document cleanup, I think. But it's under member sponsored, and it talks about reoccurring. But which really, I think we need to think through the language there a little bit more, because we should have recurring meetings. I'm not against that at all. But it's really not part of the member sponsored nonprofit section. It can apply to other areas, I think. And then reoccurring technically can conflict against the number of reservations if we're not careful how we word that. So I think we should go back and rethink how that's worded.
Okay.
But I mean, I agree with the general premise of everything. And then when you got into the section, I think it's administrative, when you got into the section of pavilion, we talked about spaces available, 4-hour blocks, and additional time. And there's a few things there that really applies to everything. It's not just a pavilion, it applies to this room or any other room. That's the way it was originally thought, is to offer these things 4-hour blocks. So,
Okay, yeah, we could take that and generalize it to all assets, being the assembly room, any of the 19th hole or whatever, any splitting up these rooms.
and then my final is a concern that that's really, again, up to everybody, well, and planning on the was to say that non-member or commercial for-profit reservations, they don't need a member sponsor. I have a lot of feedback from the community saying they don't really want outsiders coming in and running our pavilion or our lodge. They want it always to be available for the members. So to say there's not a sponsor, or not required to have a sponsor, I think that's a concern. I'm just voicing that concern.
Where we were focused on that was weddings. We feel that the pavilion itself will be a wonderful venue for weddings, and if there, once the word gets out, a few people use the pavilion for a wedding, and it spreads back towards Dallas or up into Oklahoma, that we will have people there will be an increase in the number of people that use it that are outside. They are not member sponsored. And, it's a great opportunity for increased revenue for the POA to have those events out there. And on the schedule, the table down there, the pavilion with a $1,500 and a $2,000 room fee, fee per room, that was covered in there. That we felt like that was a reasonable dollar amount to charge for the use of that. If we see a larger number of people requesting to use it, that we the board raise that fee from $2,000 up to
4,000, 5,000, whatever you feel comfortable to slow it down. It's the law of supply and demand. You can control how many times people choose to reserve that space out there from an outside source. Clark?
If I may,
Yes. Yeah.
I don't care what.
I was under the impression, so to hit on Jim's point about not required to have a member sponsor. So when we had this discussion before, I remember us going through the definition of member. And the definition of member at that time was grandma, residents, and children, right? Or thereabouts. So I'm under the impression that if we're doing a non-member commercial reservation and this fee schedule applies, I was under the impression we would have a member sponsor. And that given this fee structure, because if you go outside to not require a member sponsor, these numbers are way too low. Way too low, okay? So required to have a member sponsor tells me that, and hopefully the member sponsor is talking about cousins, nephews, nieces, aunts, brothers, sisters.
If you go back up to member reservations where it says, in the second line, it's for those member reservations for the immediate family, children only. It doesn't cover cousins, aunts and uncles.
So your definition of member is not the same as our bylaw definition of member.
That I don't know.
I was under the impression that's what we were talking about when we did that.
It didn't, what was in it did not align with the bylaws, but I'm not sure if this is closer to the bylaws.
It's closer, but not, no cigar.
I have no answer for you.
Does that make sense? We're not, the word member in here is not aligning with our definition. So if we go not required, these numbers are way too small, way too low. But
We're open to
I'm
suggestions.
in the camp, personally, I am in the camp that says that if a non-member or commercial reservation, I'm in the camp that says it should have a member sponsor. And that the only way that you would do that is something just outside of the definition of member as defined in our document, in our bylaws. In other words, I'm talking about cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff that's not part of the immediate definition of member as we, I'm really not for opening it up to the world. I don't like that.
But would we still charge them? Are you saying if grandma, a member reserves it for her third cousins, nephews, or whatever, you know?
That's the reason I was okay with these lower numbers.
They have to pay it.
The reason I was okay with these lower numbers.
They have to
Yeah.
pay something.
Yeah.
Still pay something.
Yeah, but it's gotta be sponsored.
Still gotta be sponsored.
That was my,
Raise the price up, so.
I mean, you know,
6,000.
I really don't wanna go to the world. That's my opinion, that's my opinion. I mean, if you're going outside of the defined term member, as we've defined it in our bylaws, then that's where these fees start applying.
Charlie, you got the bylaws there?
4.06, member just can have guest cards, the plastic card for their dependent children, grandparents, and grandchildren, basically.
They can have a card.
Yeah, which entitles them to do things on their own.
Need a microphone.
Yeah.
Somebody bring a mic to Charlie. Thanks, Lee.
So Courtney touched on it, that the benefit privilege extends to those lineage, okay, for the card only, okay? That's really not other privileges, just like you can't extend golf privileges, they have to pay for them. Okay, so that's the way, that's the thing I think you gotta be real careful on, that it's the member privileges are the member privileges, okay? And in this case, it's strictly a card, and something else that we've done is we've approved it for the toll tax, so that's just entry, okay, and they pay for it versus being able to use something. So be real careful on there saying that, because you're kind of mixing apples and oranges there a little bit.
One more, it was like, yeah, administrative change was, when you got into, the liquor law, like you said, it's right, but the reality is we put BYOB into the bill. We might need to clarify that, and if we do, you can't move things back and forth. Right.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Pete, one administrative deal, catering and the exhibit A, exhibit B, they actually apply to all of the above, not just a non-member commercial rate. So a member can be catering, so you might want to just bump those up and refer to them later or something.
Okay.
Jim Fox?
So just two small points. You allow floor, decor,
Yes.
that don't have anything on the walls. Does that include sidewalk chalk?
What are you referring to?
Well, I just know we have like there in our pavilions in the parks, sidewalk chalk. So you might want to clarify if that's not good.
Okay, we can add that.
A second point too was, we were leaving furniture out on the patio for the members to use.
Yes.
If they're out there, I guess the permit holder has to go up there and say, we got use of this whole pavilion.
Well, I would encourage a manager to do that versus one of our members. I think that's a manager's responsibility rather than expecting a member to go out there and claim it and then getting into a,
I should want to put that in the policy, that the full use of the pavilion has wording that includes the patio, because we're encouraging people to say, go ahead and use that, the pavilion is. So they may think that it's theirs to use even inside the pavilion, or got to get a sign that says, permit holder as part of the use of the facility.
Okay. Yeah, that's where we were, we've added a lot of this stuff back and forth and around and everything. That's where we can't cover everything that's going to occur. Unless we've got somebody as a mind reader, that can look 15 years in advance here. So, and I shouldn't be game like that. I'm not. But that's,
Yeah, to clarify.
yeah, okay.
Okay, Sam Samuels?
I was asked a question the other day, and I was wondering about the pavilion part, as far as people bringing in smokers, grills, charcoal type equipment. Is that going to be allowed in the pavilion?
Shouldn't be, no.
And I'm
Should
wondering,
be on the outside, on the perimeter.
should that be written somewhere to say you cannot do that? Because if it's raining, the next thing you know, they'll be pulling in their charcoal grills into the pavilion.
Maybe would that fall under table decorations, no open flames in bold letters down here?
Just something
Yeah.
think about.
Cooking apparatus.
Cooking apparatus.
It is a wood pavilion, so we might ought to back it off 15 feet or something from, no closer than some distance, whatever makes sense. Jim Adams?
May I make a suggestion that we,
In an effort to move us along, may I make a suggestion that we, refer this back to the committee with the comments they've heard tonight, and that if the board members want to submit, ideas or questions, or, for them to contemplate one more time, that they receive those and consider those, and then,
member of that.
I don't know, Clark, do you have another comment? Clark, I saw you.
No, I was just gonna say that's the reason we backed that, your, 15 feet from the pavilion. Notice that when we repaired that parking lot on the backside of the pavilion, we put in that area there that's now dirt. That's about 15 feet to the parking lot, and that's the reason why that last column over on that corner, which is the indention corner where the food serving line goes, that last column there has 50 amp plugs in it. Those are not 110s or 220s, those are 50 amps on that last column. So that the vendors who pull up out there can plug in. Now, hopefully, some people don't need 50 amps. I was contemplating myself, because I have a 50 amp that dumps down to a 30 amp. Most of your vendors are 30 amp, not 50. I've got a converter from my RV, I was gonna go to Camping World anyway, I can get us one, at least one, to dump down to 30 amp if we need it. But those are 50 amp plugs in that last column. And that space where we redid that parking lot there is what you're talking about. That's the reason that's there.
So, kind of back to Jim's point, I'd like to give Steve and Pete some direction. So I just want to take sort of an indicative vote about, do we allow non-member sponsored reservations of the pavilion at all, or not? Or maybe we have a third level of fees, like Clark was suggesting, charge them a lot more. I don't know. I think wedding pavilions cost wedding venues can cost like 10,000.
Easily.
So,
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Especially if you have daughters.
so it's either, not at all.
It's horrible.
Right.
It's your fault.
Right. It's either not at all, or maybe we have a third level of fee for a non-member sponsored reservation. So,
I like
What are-
Clark was saying.
hang on, let me just get an indication from board members. Do we want to even go there at all? Do we want to go strictly member sponsored? Who all wants to limit it to strictly member sponsored? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we got a majority there wants to limit to strictly member sponsored. So no,
We can always change that.
we could always change that.
There's open dates
Right.
that we see through the next few years. We're just saying, hey, that thing could have been rented out.
Right.
We could change it.
Okay, so Pete, I guess that's your direction to kind of go in right now, at least, so.
We can do that, and, again, you typically, if you're talking wedding reservations, those are done a year or more in advance, so, it's not something you can go change 6 weeks later, say somebody's gonna do it, so. You gotta be thinking that way, that it's long-term on that reservation, so.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. Any other comments on that topic? Okay, I guess you have to,
Thank you.
some input.
Pete, are you up to send the donation thing for the TV? You're doing that? Send the donation.
Somebody forgot to tell me. Okay, who wants to donate? I know.
Does anybody know anything about it?
I don't.
Okay, so I guess we
I
should,
can, I'll speak and he can shake his head no, because I talked to Steve the other day that he just was intending to raise donations so that we could purchase televisions for the pavilion. That's about the extent I know it. He's shaking his head yes, so I think I'm summarizing fairly properly.
Clark,
Somebody was gonna donate one.
There you go, we got one.
The big one. And I'm trying to remember who it was.
like 85 or
One
so?
of the organizations that's on that list.
Oh, okay, Women's Love or Charlie.
Yeah,
said something.
Marcus was gonna put some money in with somebody or, And then the club was gonna do the rest and do it.
Yeah. Charlie, do you have thoughts on that?
I think a key part of it, and I think what the intention is at least an 85 inch, and that would go on the wall on the back of the storage area, okay? There's been some discussion further down the road of putting some up in the eaves up there, and if we get to that point, they've got to be pretty darn big TVs to make a difference, because they're going to be way up there. So that would just be the thought process. The other thought process would be that they would be predominantly for the groups to be able to present either tea times or scores, PowerPoints or things like that, not to get guys with a case of beer to go out there and watch the football game necessarily. So it would be more for those group use. So, and I guess that would fall underneath how you wrote the deal, that if it's not a scheduled event, they can't use the fans, the screens, and the music system if it's an unscheduled. So.
Okay, for more discussion later on, apparently. So how about we take a 5-minute break now? Let's be back at 7:30.
I get to that.
we're back in session. I think everybody's here. So the last thing under committee updates, we've got long-range planning committee update on biannual survey from Jim Adams.
Hi, I just wanted to give everybody an update on where the long-range planning committee is and get, or just have you guys contemplate a couple of questions, and maybe the next meeting we actually vote on it. And you might want to go back and mull it over with the people that you know. So what we're starting to focus on is these the biannual survey, and related to that are a couple of questions. And so we're going through and contemplating the questions that we're going to ask in the survey now. But what I wanted to put before the board is we've had a number of people bring to us that they want to limit the survey to one survey response per member. So we're saying a member being our household in this case, as bylaws would define. And so it would work just like a vote when we do the board meeting. So that recommendation has come up, and the committee is in favor of doing that, is to limiting it to one survey per household. And the related question is, should we do the survey, since we'll be using the same tool, because we worked with Scott and Leanne, we believe the survey can be done with the new voting tool. So question becomes, should we do the survey at the same time as the annual vote, which takes place in February, or should we do it separately? It would cost, whatever you guys know, it costs $1,500 extra or something like that. Would be the downside to doing it separately. Maybe, and then we try to add some feedback to the downside of doing it together would be one, portion of it's a survey and a portion of it's a vote. And so some might take it, the survey is now a vote on something, but it's not. So, and so we just want to get that before the board, and you guys think about it, ask people questions, and maybe next time we need to make a decision on when we do the survey, because we really want, we have to have feedback, have to have a survey back probably in early spring, so we can work on the long range plan to have a plan by late summer back to the board to help in the budgeting process. So it will need to be done around the vote, sometimes plus or minus if you don't do it with the vote.
So that was the one benefit that came to my head right then when you're talking about that, the timing of it to feed right in to our new budgeting cycle now that we've gone to the calendar year, fiscal year. So that would make a lot of sense, as far as time. Any other thoughts? Clark?
We want to set the budget for calendar 21. So if you do it in February, you're not going to start working on the new budget until next August or September, right?
At the earliest, yeah.
At the earliest.
Right, but the long range plan would be done by end of summer, and then you use that to start contemplating the budget, building the budget. So, and the budget, we usually are looking at.
February seems a little.
It would be, February's survey. Let's just go with February or March for the survey. And then at the end of March, now you're in April, it takes 3 or 4 months to work on that long range plan to get the survey results back. We do a town hall. We don't have to do any of those things, but that's historically what we've done. We review the survey with the community, get feedback, and then build a long range plan off of that. So it probably would take 6 months plus or minus after the survey. So we're looking at August, September, and then the budget is probably coming out. Planned budget would be probably coming out at least October, I would guess. Sure.
Other thoughts?
So just think about it, maybe next time we'll have it on there for you guys to officially tell us how we should do it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, community manager report from Charlie. Is this your last one?
Lois, can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay, let's go to page 67 here. Clark earlier touched on the, about 84,000 surplus after the second month. Quite frankly, I'm pleasantly surprised to the point of being shocked about that. Remember when we were doing the budget here, we were in the throes of COVID and really had no idea what our future looked like. Bullet point 2 is kind of related to that. When we decided to take out the PPP loan, which we clearly qualified for, our accountant recommended that we do so, and we took it out. I think we took it out for a reasonable amount, and we did spend all of that out of the lodge. So currently, in First State Bank lent, do you remember how many hundreds of millions of dollars on the PPP loan? It was a staggering amount for one bank. I was shocked on it. But they are actually have asked all of the loans under $150,000 to hold off on applying for forgiveness because they're dealing with the big ones first, which makes a lot of sense, right? So there's a lot of massive big loans out there that First State Bank is working with, and they're going to work their way through it. So we're kind of on a pause with that. The good news is we're not needing it right at this point in time, and we're not dependent. But potentially that is another $80,000 in loan forgiveness if you come to us. So the drainage piece, we've got our list back together. There's going to be a question that comes up tonight that Rick's going to read earlier. And I know it was a couple meetings ago, I asked several of you to get with me. That's one of the things I'd like to do. So reach out to me after the meeting who wants to sit down and review it. The vast majority of the projects are on private member property, and that's something we typically stay away from. So I think that's going to be the decision that we have to make, and I think that'll be part of my transition. We talked about the ad sales continue to be good. I wrote this before Clark sent this email, but I initially got good feedback about the golf course weed spray. I think Clark talked about possibly missing some surrounds and some things like that. So my understanding, they did it all. I haven't spoken to Brian since you sent your email, Clark, but I'll get with him and find out. Surplus lots, this is something that was approved last time. I went out and looked at those 2 lots and went, where do they start, where do they end? Okay, so I have ordered 2 surveys. The intention is to charge the buyers the cost of those surveys. Most everybody gets a survey when they buy, a property anyway, so we wanted to do that. The one in the east gate, there is a vacant POA lot, and then the lot we're putting for sale, and then there's an occupied house. So once they get the stakes out there. As a side note, I was contacted by the property owner directly adjacent to the lot on the north end, and they're concerned about the potential flooding, and they sent me some photos, so I just got those. Okay, so that's something that we're gonna have to look at, and because the pictures show a lot of water going through there, so I think that's something we need to look at. I put in here an idea here, and I'm happy to back off of it, go another direction, but I would like to say, one of the things we've done when we sold some surplus property at the lodge, when we sold the jet ski and all that, would be put together having a sealed bid auction on those 2 lots, that let people come in. We as a POA could set a reserve and then let people come in and advertise it, contact all the builders out there, all the real estate agents, and see. And what they do is they fill out this form, and then typically the highest bidder wins. Okay. If you don't like that idea, then we can go and we'll have to set some prices, because quite frankly, I know stuff is going, good lots are selling for $30,000, $35,000, $40,000. The one in the north end, I don't have any idea what that would be worth. I think a builder may have a better idea. So, anybody have any comments, or would you rather set prices and go for it? Do you have your microphone?
I would think that selling it through normal market conditions like any other property, I mean, there would be some cost, I guess, if we have to work out with a listing service, but we would get better response on determining a proper price and setting the market value, and then getting a proper purchaser. That's just my opinion. And versus a bid that, depending on how far out it goes and who sees it, may not
could, the options work typically with, you can put a reserve on it so you protect yourself on the downside. You could argue that you might even get a higher price because some people may bid high to get it. The challenge with us doing anything, if we put it in the MLS right now, is that the first person who gets to the PLA office that buys it. But I'd be happy if the board's okay with that. Jim, if you and I want to talk about setting prices on it, because, the agents, I talked to a couple agents that kind of go, gee whiz, what is it? Yeah, I mean, if y'all are, if you don't like the steel bid deal, then we'll go with an MLS listing and go from there. So.
Yeah, I mean, my preference is the bid auction thing you're talking about with a good size reserve or minimum price. I think that protects us. I think right now is a good time, and there's a lot of demand there. So might be a pretty good time to do that, and that way it gets done. That's my thoughts. Others, anybody got a preference one way or the other? Sam?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should have a minimum dollars, so that we don't, just give it away. Have a minimum price we accept the bid on.
Okay. So it doesn't seem like there's okay.
How do we determine the minimum? Is that for realtors again that would help us? What do you think it might be?
That's a good, that's kind of like, that's the difficulty with setting a listing price too, is what is it? Because, in a newly platted subdivision in Prosper, Salina, it's pretty easy, everything's pretty similar. The one in the east gate backs up to 211 and gonna have the gate next to it, the road in front of it's got a road on 3 sides, so, that one's kind of out there. I don't know. I guess the other issue is if we set it at $40,000, then the practice in the past is then they have to come back to the board under executive session, and the board would have to vote on that price. Okay, that's how we did a lot of exceptions way back when. So I think that's where it gets a little bit dicey when we publish prices out there. Now, that's not saying we have to do it that way now, but I would think if we decide to go with the MLS, we're going to have to make sure that we broadcast it far and wide and give everybody a chance to come in with it. And that's what I was trying to do with an auction, is to say, okay, here's what we're selling. You come back with us, and tell me what you'll pay on a top price. Almost, I hate to say this, but almost like eBay to a certain extent. And I mean, eBay is amazingly successful, right? So.
Jim?
To the point to get a minimum reserve, I mean, I'm fine, that makes sense to me, but that's essentially setting what we think the market value is, so. And when we made the motion last month, I thought the intention was that Charlie and Rich and team could figure that out based on communications with maybe local realtors, or just based on information they see. And if maybe if you need help, maybe we can go find a local realtor to help us out, or I'll go help you, and maybe they'll give us some information on help us set the minimum price, or market price.
Yeah, I would think we can look at what sales of lots have occurred as best we can, comparable. On the one on the north, apparently have to take into account maybe some work for drainage, right? I don't know if a builder could tell you that, so let's try to get a couple of realtors to help you.
Okay.
We got 2 on ACC, right? And then maybe a couple of builders, internal guys that have dealt with the drainage costs they see, and then let you recommend it to us. And then I like the sealed bid auction proposal, but get that input to set the reserve.
Get a minimum. Okay.
And let's get them done, and move on from this. Let's not let it drag out, you know.
Okay. All right. Some of this is, Clark talked about earlier. The lodge had a very strong August. It is continuing into September. Keep crossing your fingers, knocking on wood. Cost of goods sold trend is favorable. That's due to a couple different factors here. A little bit was the price we took back at the end of January. The second was changing of suppliers to U.S. food. The third that really helped us last month was the menu mix of higher margin items. We did the salad trios, and that's always a lower cost, very popular item. And if you could come up with those every day of the week, that'd be fantastic. But the one we're doing now is very popular. It's just not, it's higher margin, it's a higher cost item. So you need just kind of some give and take. Kathy earlier talked about the tables. We're generally at 50% and with proper space. But then again, there are a number of our members that are co-mingling between other households, and we're not enforcing any of that. We're leaving that up to them. That's their choice on that. Chris has gotten back with his first cut at the road plan for the half year. And what he's identified, and I'm having him go back and double check to make sure he's got the right area, would be that we would overlay some select areas. And that would be putting new asphalt on top of some existing asphalt. The problem is, what we've done before is with the milling is if you mill and there's no substrate underneath there, then the milling doesn't hold up. So in this case, along with the paving company, they've come up with these areas here that they don't have enough base on. So my question is, how do they stabilize that existing asphalt right there so we put new on top of it? So Chris is working through with that one, and hopefully we can get going on some paving here. The way the weather's turning, it's getting pretty cool pretty quick. And if push comes to shove, this would be money that would carry over to next year, and then we have a full road plan. We do have a few areas that the water department's gotten into and cut up that we need to get patched. And we'll clearly get those patched. But other than that, the other areas are not in horrible shape. They're just in shape that we'd like to see them improve. Yes.
What about road striping? You know, I drive around like on the east side there, when they come to the overlay, it covers up the road striping.
Yeah.
You can't even see it.
We typically have to take that into consideration whenever we seal it, mill it, or overlay it. We'll typically have to stripe it. And we don't stripe every road. We don't stripe, the dead end streets, but the main thoroughfares are striped.
This is on Kyle Drive East.
Is there some missing striping?
You just can't see it because of the sealer that's put on there.
Okay. But if you would, let's sidebar afterward. If you could give me some mailbox numbers, and I'll go look at that. So we've moved the auto toll tags and the boat registration from security to the PLA office. That negated the need for a lobby in the new guardhouse redesign. It also puts one function, one person in charge of membership cards, a boat registration, and toll tags. And so far, it's worked out quite well. It is a change, so change sometimes comes hard, but I think long-term it'll work out great. It also helps us streamlining the billing of all that, so it's a win-win overall. So from that standpoint, so that's really the thing I have there. One thing I did not put on here, and I'm sorry, we didn't put on here a security guardhouse update. That would have come underneath Sam or myself. The architects did a first run at the plans, and they did it under one of their versions was the exact same footprint that we currently have. So the thought process there is if we choose to go that route, then they could go in and see, is there any value in the studs that are there or the slab? Okay, I would be surprised if there was a value in the studs, because one of the things we're talking about is making the inside of the building taller from 8 feet to 10 feet. The other one they did is they enlarged it a small amount there. So, but we did meet with them on site last week with Rich, myself, Scott Manning, and really looked at it, I think they can design a space that's very functional, improved functionality, greatly improved aesthetics with using the same footprint. So we put that back to them. They originally had drawn a small safe room, and I charged to them to make a much bigger safe room. If the safe room is a top objective, we don't want it to be too small. It would be a shame for it to be too small, right? You go, that's too tight. So we want to have it big. I was very pleased with the architect. They brought out an expert from a company that does security systems for banks. They do all kinds of door access and cameras and all this other stuff. They did also bring out a camera specialist that I was blown away with in terms of how knowledgeable this person was. And their company does a number of school districts over in the East Texas area. So he did start talking about the possibilities that we have. Currently, we have camera systems with digital video recordings on site. At the lodge, we've got a camera system and the DVRs here. At the front gate, we've got a camera system and the DVR is there. Like on 1316, the DVR is out there by the bathroom. In the New World Order, I think it would make sense to have all of those cameras feeding into the guardhouse and have a centralized area where they can access all of that video. One of the things that we're thinking in the future is to be able to have a video capability, of course, at the front gate and the east gate like we currently have, then taking it so all the lodge video, the pavilion video, the golf course restrooms on 4, 13, 16, Little Fox Pond, the exterior of those restrooms, make sure you understand that, nothing interior, exterior cameras, okay, to be able to do, observe any potential vandalism. This is one thing we'll have to talk to Brown about is, do we do a DVR at the pro shop, DVR at the cart barn, cameras at low water crossing 2, low water crossing 3. A lot of these, I think the future will be cameras. Okay, one of the things I'd like to see, just think if we could have a camera focused in on the water depth measurements at low water crossing 1 and low water crossing 2, so that you could see it from the guardhouse versus sending somebody out there. So a lot of different possibilities, and I don't envision us having somebody sitting there watching those monitors all 24/7. I think the important ones they'll be able to cycle through as needed, and then if an issue comes up, they can replay and look at it. So that's the big issue there. But I was very pleased with the company in terms of their approach. One of the other things that they were looking at doing in design would be having a roof line extend out over the lanes coming in, the security lanes coming in. Exactly how that manifests itself, we don't quite know yet. A big part of what that would allow, though, in a pouring rain, your vehicle could be underneath that and you could carry on a conversation with the security guard. Right now, it's a mess. I mean, if it's pouring down rain, we did tell them we wanted to seal the window and we would have two-way communication like a good bank teller, or maybe even better than that, Chick-fil-A, to have a real good audio system, have, the security guy have a headset on and that. And so that's where that overhang would help, because if it's pouring down rain, you're not going to be able to carry on a conversation. So now, having said that, one of the other things that they put in there would be a nice cedar, stone, and black steel kind of an entry sign that would have a height restriction device on it. You've seen them where you come in and if it's got a pole, and we would set that. They're talking about the overhang being 14 feet high. Legal limit's like 13.6, so we'd actually give us 6 inches. But the thought process would be to put something in advance if by chance somebody comes in, because we don't want to wipe out the guardhouse. We'd rather wipe out that sign right there, for the portion of that sign. So that's just an idea. They also had some other ideas about exit gates going out the main gate and gate placement, which was it was interesting because it was out of the box thinking, and it was different than we look at it, but I think that's what we pay him for, right, is to come up with some different thought process, so, yeah.
You mentioned you talked to them too concerning the scheduling time that it would take to be on the site.
Yep, I told them 2 weeks or less, and they kind of chuckled at me, so they didn't commit to 2 weeks or less, okay? But I threw that out there. We did also put together, one of the things in our document, we did put together kind of some ideas of best practices in terms of getting it done as soon as possible, or as quickly as possible. One of the things we said we want you to specify standard windows, standard doors, this. We also said we want every piece of material on site before you begin demolition and construction. We have the yard over at the POA office that's fairly close to this, and we said, you can store all your material here, our workers will bring it as you need it to do it. The safe room that we're suggesting would be a modular, prefab safe room, so they could drop it in place and then frame up around it, okay? We're even looking at things in terms of walls. We don't want to go with a typical drywall, tape and bed, texture and paint, okay, because that's numerous steps. There's actually some panels out there that are like a wallboard panel, but it's got a smooth finish on it. And so they stud it out, and then they come in and cut the panels and put the panels up, and you're done, okay? So it's more of an industrial style look, and that's really the whole bit. We said we really don't foresee any wooden cabinets and cabinet drawers and stuff. We want it to be a command center and industrial, and we can go with it. Even the things we discussed is if we were going to do the security system, camera system, that we would buy all the equipment, we would set it up over in the back of the POA office and make sure everything's working, and then just move it over there. Now, having said that, after I met the camera company, I was blown away with these guys, and I think they would be, I'd rather go with a professional from that standpoint. So lots of different ideas. They're going to come back with a second version. Yes? Microphone, please.
It makes sense about the build, but I hope we don't, on the exterior, I hope we don't, at the expense of the aesthetics of the building, do something just to speed it up.
That, good point. We talked about the exterior of the building matching what we've got over at the lodge with stone, cedar, those sort of things. We also talked about going with 10-foot ceilings inside because it gives us more monitor room. It takes the height of the building up, and then it would have a steeper pitched roof to add some interest to it. So yeah, aesthetics are a very important part. Quite frankly, masonry may take the longest of it, but we know we need it, okay? So I think, yeah, that's right. I just threw down 2 weeks to get them to think about it. It may be 4 to 6 weeks, but we definitely want the aesthetics to be good. And they understand that. So their first cut on it was very general type exterior. And I think they needed more. It was almost all stone. I think I said, you need a little bit of interest and variety in this. And so, but they're a good company, good vibes so far. All right. Next, if you go to page 69 and 70, okay, you got to put on my glasses here. We talked about this way back in the spring, and then COVID-19 came along and kind of got us sidetracked to some other areas. Page 69 is current employee benefits, okay, current employee benefits. Page 70 is really what we proposed. We've already gone through and signed off on the 37.5 hours, I believe. Moving to the PTO is the big factor. The 401k, way back in the spring, the information I had gotten wasn't quite complete. What we originally talked about would be doing a 1% grant to the employees to get them motivated and fired up about the 401k. When we finally spoke to our 401k management company, they said, you really can't do that. That's more like a profit sharing So you gotta wait till the end of the year to do that. So conceivably, you could have an employee that leaves in November and been with us 20-something years and doesn't get that 1% match. So what I'm suggesting is that we go back and say, okay, we're gonna do a 1-to-1 match up to a 4% maximum. Same dollar impact, okay, it's all in the budget right now. It's just the employees will be getting it at that point, every month when we do the matching, they'll be getting it. So really here, there's two things, okay? In terms of, well, there's actually three things. There's PTO, so here's the schedule. This is the schedule that we've spoken about for a while, and you can see that compared to the vacation sick time over there. One of the discussions we had early on would be, and originally we looked at doing this in July. Well, of course, COVID took that out. We looked at October. Susan Johnson's departure kind of took that out. So Crystal now feels comfortable of doing this on January the 1st. So the thought process would be going over on January the 1st. Sick time would go away. Right now, we've got about $120,000 in accrued unused sick time, okay? We discussed doing a token type payout to those employees that had unused sick time. 5% of that is about $6,000, and actually it's even less than that, it's about $51,000 or $5,200. And then 10% is about $12,000. So that's one thing we don't have to do, but we did discuss it way back when, and that's a possibility. So I guess three different things. Number one would be, going to a 1-to-1 dollar for dollar match up to 4%. Right now we're at 3%.
So actually, I think that would probably be a little less impact because not everybody contributes, whereas the 1% we were gonna make everybody. So.
Correct.
I'm good with that. Other thoughts, Jim, Adam?
No, everything sounds fine, but I'm realizing I only got half the factors combined in 38.
Uh-oh.
37. When you started referring to the larger numbers, you don't have an extra copy.
I don't. I can give you my packet. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. We got a new copier last week.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
But if you could send me a packet.
Okay. Hey, Clark, if it was intentional, I would have sent him 300 pages. I would have bogged him down with 300 pages. So, this, for some reason, this packet was a bear to get together, and then I walk in there, it's a new copy machine, I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm an old guy. So I guess this is something that the HR committee, we bannered back and forth, and I think that from a PTO standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world, okay? And I think it'll be minimal impact on it. And I think going in place on the 1st of January. I will tell you, if you're not careful, it can get confusing real quick, okay? And if, ideally is if everybody started on January the 1st, that's easy. I do believe though that we should tie it back to their anniversary date, because I think then it makes it an event every year in their anniversary. It's a big deal for them, especially when they start crossing those thresholds. So I think to me, that's a positive thing. The other reservation I have is if everybody's PTO expires at the end of December, then October, November, and December are really painful because everybody's taking time off, okay? And it's really hard, especially in our business. So that way it's spread throughout the year. I think it's much better. So.
Charlie, I thought we already voted on the 5% versus 10%. Didn't we already vote on the 10% on that?
Way back when? I'd have to check. Yeah.
We did.
Okay.
The budget, 10% was in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was taken care of.
The carryover's not in here. Is it?
Clark?
Carryover from year to year.
Of accrued sick? Or,
No, you're going to PTO.
PTO?
Carryover of PTO.
Oh, okay. Actually, it's written so you can only carry over 40 hours, and that has to be used within the first 90 days.
But that's in the thing on here.
Yeah, that's in the thing, not the summary, so, yeah.
So you do have carryover.
We have a carryover limit, yes, thank you.
Okay, so I guess we would need a motion to approve the going from 3% match to 4% match instead of the 1% grant. So we have a motion. So Jerry makes that motion. Do we have a second? Sam, any other discussion on that? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion carries, Charlie. So,
Thank you.
all right, and then one, I think we already.
Everything else is good, so 10%,
Set to
okay.
go. Again, I get Crystal really up to date on that, that spreadsheet. That was a bear.
Who's met Crystal? Clark has, okay, a couple of you, yeah. She took over for Susan Johnson. She is dove in with both feet and has been an absolute joy to work with, and she probably knows the spreadsheet as well as I do, if not better at this point, so, because that's her world. She did also have a conference call with our payroll system, APS payroll, and they deal with any and every system known to man, so they're very accommodating, so. All right, if you go to page 77, really the only change on, this is a sheet, those of y'all that are carrying over past March, this is just a rough plan for the future board meetings. The only date that's not the third Monday of every month would be December. So the third Monday in December would be the 21st, which would be Christmas week, with Christmas Eve being on Thursday. And then Christmas Day, I think, is on a Friday. So the thought process would be to move that one back a week to the 14th. And I think that's really the only other change. The leadership Kiowa, we did this last year for the board member candidates. Then we had a candidate meet and greet. Boy, we don't like to have a meet and greet these days. So whatever that looks like in the future, we'll have to see, and then the candidate forum. So conceivably, depending on what's going on at that point in time, if the COVID restrictions are still in place, your candidate forums will be with 56 people in here, conceivably, and probably broadcast like this here. But really, the only date change is December 14th. So.
Okay, so I guess we need a motion to move the December meeting to the 14th. Do we have a motion to do that? Mark moves that. Do we have a second? Kathy? Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of moving the December meeting to the 14th, say aye. Anybody opposed? Good to go on that.
We have a request from several members out here, really led by Mark Clark. I don't know if you all know Mark, but he's involved with a group that has been doing some worshiping in people's houses and the whole bit. They really want to expand it, take it to the next level, and they've requested to use this room here, and they will do so on Sunday, well after the chapel is over with. So we typically, what happens is the PLA employees come in early in the morning on Sunday and turn over the room, so whatever was in here on Saturday, then they set it up for chapel. Chapel is being set up for 56 people right now. The chairs look similar to how they are out here, with couples, 6-foot spacing, and go all the way up. So the fellowship worship would like to come in here, and they originally said like 9 o'clock. I said, that's way too early. It'll probably have to be 10 or 10:30, because we'll have to get our staff in here and wipe down all the surfaces. And then they would actually be doing a tape review of the service, and it's associated with the church down in the Metroplex. It's much more of a contemporary type service in chapel is. I spoke with Jay Thomas, who's the president of the chapel group. He kind of chuckled and said, hey, I've tried to put together contemporary service and it hasn't gone anywhere. So Jay himself was completely good with it. He was gonna discuss it with his board and get back to me if they have any reservations. So he hasn't gotten back to me with any reservations. So from that standpoint, you'd be, doubling up the use of this room. I don't think it'll be any extra cost for our labor. It'll be the people just they may have to come in a little bit later and stay a little bit later. Yes.
My understanding of the cost, though, I thought that was set up the day before and that they didn't come in and tear down on Sunday. So this sounds like it would be an extra cost.
Well, actually, we always set up for chapel, and if there's not an event the day before, they'll set up the day before. If there's a Saturday event, they'll come in late Saturday night, early Sunday morning and set it up. Okay. In this case, the fellowship worship would use the same setup that the chapel had just used an hour and a half before. So it's a no-brainer. Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. Yes, Kathy.
Is fellowship worship a member of ours?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's many members, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think if not all, the vast majority of their members worshiping will be members, the vast majority of the people worshiping will be members out here. Yeah.
If it's outside of our membership, somebody coming in, somebody has to do a visitor pass.
Somebody will have to do a visitor's pass. So, and that could happen with chapel right now, okay, that they're calling it a visitor's pass, probably not very often, but yeah, they're predominantly all members out here. So, but it should be very straightforward and another utilization of the room. Okay, good.
Okay. So we need a motion to approve that?
Probably be good. Yeah.
All right, we have a motion to approve that.
I'm just curious why we need a motion to approve this if it's a reservation of a room like anything else like we were talking about earlier.
So the ongoing thing, so I think we.
I'm fine with it, I'm just sitting there, why do we have to have this versus the other?
I guess that's a good question. I guess it kind of legitimizes it and says, hey, the board approves that this is a use for 52 Sundays in a row. So, I guess that's kind of it.
And the fact that it will require some adjustments to the schedules, no additional cost, but adjustment to our staff schedules.
Yeah.
That's the part that I'm still a little hazy on, to be honest, because you said they come in early and now they're gonna have to stay later to adjust the furniture afterwards. Seems like that's additional cost.
No, they're not adjusting the furniture, they're just gonna wipe it down.
Okay, so they're staying later than they would typically stay. They'd have to stay through chapel and stuff, so you're paying them more, I mean, there's additional cost.
Unless we can accomplish the same thing by shifting their end times, because they typically, instead of them coming in at 4, they literally come in at 4 a.m. and leave at 6. They may have to come in at 6 and leave at 9 or so.
Again, what would you do if an organization chose to reserve the lodge on Sunday afternoon? They have to clean the furniture, pick up the furniture, and do the same thing.
Yeah, and we do that from time to time. Yeah.
My preference is we at least give some more direction on that, so.
Good.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve their request. Does have to be, you said after 10 a.m.?
I'd say either 9:30 or 10.
Okay.
So 9:30 should be safe.
9:30 or
Later.
so. That's my motion, so do we have a second? Sam seconds that. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, I think that takes us to comments from the members. Let me go on and have the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay, first question that was submitted prior to the meeting, Amy Harrell, lot, has 3 lots, 50, 94, 95, 96. I would like to request a status on the creek area behind our house on Comanche Drive. The erosion is getting worse, and the subject has been tabled a couple of times in the last year about what to do about it. When will a solution be available? So I don't think we've addressed this specific thing. We've talked in general about erosion issues or runoff issues here. This one sounds like it may be runoff from the county roads, but we will have Rich Augustiniak take a look at that sometime in this week and discuss that, you know, with Charlie and then with the landowner. But again, our general policy is if it's coming in from off-site, that's something that the homeowner needs to deal with. Second question was from Cheryl Landis, lot 445. It's really a comment. I don't think the house on the front gate should be rezoned for residential. If it does come to a vote, how do we all first give input and agree on the deed restrictions that would be implemented? You may already be answering that during the meeting, and if so, please disregard. So we address the deed restrictions we desire to have on there, which are fairly extensive. I have seen an informal short list example posted on social media, but that is not close to being considered complete enough of a list to vote on should there be an outside chance it would pass that. So I don't know that I have any specific answers to that, but the board has considered the deed restrictions that has worked out an agreement that would cover it. Last one that was submitted ahead of time, Susan Pucci, lot 637. Why are people still being allowed to display political signs that are not in compliance of our bylaws? I see an awful lot of flags that are political and not allowed by the bylaws. So I know Rich has probably talked to a whole lot. I don't know, Charlie, you have any amount on the flags? And if you'll notice, the flags come back and they will be staked at both sides as long as they're size-wise still in compliance with the bylaws. So that's how he's been addressing the flag issue, put them ground mounted with stakes on both sides. And he's done a bunch of them, I know. So that's, I guess that responds to that. Anybody in the audience with a comment or question? Jim?
Jim Lewis, 1759. You were talking about Chapel and the governor's, whatever, number 30 and 31. And as I read through the number 30, which is now posted, it indicated that church services were now full board. They could be totally without restriction. I wondered if that has been considered for our chapel here.
You know, Jim, that is a great question, and everything else I read still talks about social distancing being in place with a 6-foot limit. So as you said, Governor Abbott's on his 31st deal, and you go crazy trying to read them all. Okay, so I think everything I've read is you still want to be, 6 feet apart when you don't have a mask on. Okay, so I think that's something that Kathy and I can go back and revisit, reread it again. So, we go to the same church sometimes, and they are still, when you don't have a mask on, you got to be at least 6 feet away. So that's my fear with this, but that's something we can revisit and then we can look at. So I don't know last time I heard the chapel numbers were below 50, 54, 56, so I don't think they're really testing the limits yet. Is that what you've seen, or?
Yes, we've been doing the online because of the limitations that have been placed on the chapel as far as music and such. But I do follow along with it, and it's right at 50 and growing. And I wouldn't be surprised if we could get more back to chapel if we had some better arrangement.
Okay, so Kathy and I will relook at that.
Any other questions? Barbara?
Barbara Fox, 1452. Is there anything, in the works for having some kind of heat on the pavilion, propane tanks or something?
Mark?
No,
No?
we talked a lot about putting those industrial fans up in the wall. So they glue the heat in, roll it, shake, and roll heat in. You know what I'm talking about. But that didn't go too far. So there's no current discussion. There's plenty of electrical cords up there. So that sort of situation. And so that could be possible at some point in the future, but it was part of our construction.
Can that be something the board thinks about?
So that the pavilion can be used.
Yeah, I think since it was part of construction, that's a lodging pattern issue.
Okay, Steve.
Just like the,
Okay, Steve.
seems like a dollar issue.
I have another question.
Yes.
This was the previous board, that's when the house out front went for sale. And I asked somebody on that board whether or not the POA had thought about buying. And they just said, nope, too expensive. Well, then I came to Carol Blair's thing and her erroneous stuff, but some other stuff. And she tended to say that the POA had never even negotiated with that, anything about that. Are y'all even talking about it, or? Because at the Carol Blair thing, a lot of people said, oh, the POA should buy that, it'd be perfect, you know.
Right, yeah, I heard that from two board members that were there, that it seemed to be. So right now, I mean, that's a long process, and we go through long-range planning and our annual budgetary process. So I think we're gonna see how this plays out on the rezoning vote before we address something like that. But, you know, if there is support for it, maybe even the survey could put that on there. And if it's still there, maybe it's something the long-range planning committee wants to test.
Okay, one more question since Charlie brought it up about the chapel stuff. Now that you're having two different groups here, you don't go back to having breakfast on Sunday.
Right in between. Double revenue.
I'll buy you 2 dozen eggs and a pound of bacon, and a chicken cookie for you.
Are you kidding? I'm a cook.
That's something that can be revisited. The breakfast previously was a huge loss for us. I mean, it was it was even more than the subsidy. And I'll try to say this as respectfully as possible. The events that work at the lodge are usually events that have adult beverages associated with them. Okay, so it works, right? Okay, but that is something we can look at because it just didn't make any sense when chapel was closed, and now that it's come back, I don't know how many people would be. The other thing that would make it hard is with the restrictions. We're going to do half of the business. You're kind of restricted to 50%. It was marginal to begin with, but I think that's something we can look at. I don't know how quick that other group's going to get fired up and going, and then we'll have to see, and, that might be something that determines it. Let me go back and answer the other question too, because I was part of it. You know, whatever number you bought the log cabin at, you're gonna have to spend at least that again to fix it up, and that's a lot of money, okay? We have perfectly functioning office space at the POA. It's kind of nice because it limits the amount of people we can hire. And so it keeps the overhead down and, you know, it works. I do also think it makes sense for us to have the leadership over there where the yard is. We see a lot of the activities come and go. What I wouldn't want to do is have the POA be in a position of us being the initial contact with people that are interested in Lake Kiowa. That's really the realtor's job, is to show them the houses, you know, tour them around and do all that stuff. So I think that, you know, that's part of it, there too. That is, I think Rick dealt with it pretty, you know, in terms of saying, hey, let's see what the future holds. So.
Okay, that all? Okay, we're going to, go out of regular session into an executive session, so we need a motion to go out of regular session. So we have a motion there, we have a second, Steve. All in favor of going into executive session, say aye. Motion. Let's see, Jerry motion. I like your motion. You made one.